And that's all I have to say about that topic. Um, Another thing I wanted to ask was because I see Chief Began is here, and I wanted to ask Brandon if he employs citizen officers.
We only do sworn officers out here. We don't have any citizen officers.
Okay, well, I was just curious, because I was on the OPD website looking for like crime statistics and so forth. And I was just curious to know, because I've been through the Oregon Citizens Police Academy, I've been through the Toledo Citizens Police Academy. Does OPD utilize data policing, which is a strategy that law enforcement use to help mitigate and solve crimes, identify patterns and prevent crimes? And I was just curious to know if you guys utilize that.
Is that the question? Yeah, I mean, we do look over our crime statistics and hotspots where crime is, and we do extra patrols and increased patrols in those areas.
So, but do you use it to help mitigate like future crimes based on those statistics? Because I didn't see the statistics, and I was wondering if you published those statistics.
We don't have the statistics listed on our website, but we do look at the data internally and where the crimes are. We do proactive policing in those areas.
I was also curious to know if you do utilize that, then does that allow you to apply for grants for, to help with your contributions that, supplement state, federal, and local?
We apply for grants on a consistent basis whenever we see something that may fit the needs of the department that we would be eligible for. We do put in for grants. We've had major grants over the last couple of years of over $1.5 million that we've gotten.
But is it because of, does data policing help apply for grants, I guess is what I'm asking?
And for some grants, it may, depending on the parameters of the grants.
Okay, very good. Well, I was just curious, and I only asked because I didn't see statistics online for crimes that occur in Oregon.
Okay, we do an annual report that has all of our crime statistics that is available.
And where would I find that at?
We have it internally. You can do a records request. We hold those.
Well, okay. I think that was all I had for tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Smeedy. We're going to go a little bit out of order here. We're going to take item 48 first with the Jerusalem Historical Society. I'm going to start out with Mr. Major, and then Mrs. Quilter would like to come up and just introduce the people that are here tonight.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Major.
Thank you, Mr. President. So item 48 allows us to enter into an agreement with the Oregon Jerusalem Historical Society. If you remember back last year, the Land Bank put out a grant program for demolishing buildings and doing environmental cleanup. So basically brownfield remediation type grants. And we were awarded the grant. So now the grantee is the Oregon Jerusalem Historical Society. The other grantee, because Oregon did actually get two of them, was the Buffalo Rock Brewing Company. So they were able to utilize that grant to remove the asbestos in the building and do some other work. So I think there was the underground storage tank issues as well. So they were able to pay for that work utilizing those funds. And that can go to private entities. So Buffalo Rock, being the private entity, was the grant recipient. In this case, it's the Oregon Jerusalem Historical Society. And so they were awarded the grant. Now, this was a pretty substantial amount of money for the Historical Society. And since this is a reimbursement grant, what has to happen is the work has to happen and the invoice has to be paid prior to getting reimbursement. So in this case, what this agreement essentially does is has the city step in and pay the invoices, and then reimbursement would come back to the city. So just because they don't have the sufficient funds to be able to pay all the invoices for the work that's planned in this. Now, we suspect that the work for this project is going to be pretty quick. This is going to be for the demolition of the St. Mark's Lutheran Church and some other ancillary things. Some utility connections need to be closed and reconnected, and some other work needs to be done. But the main work is the demolition. Now, as a part of this, there is a grant match. The city committed to $30,000 from last year's budget to go to the Historical Society. The Historical Society decided that they would like to use that $30,000 match plus an additional $7,500 from funds that they have available to match the $112,000 that was received by the land bank. So essentially, this would allow us to enter into that agreement. So just to make sure that, just so we're clear that the Oregon Jerusalem Historical Society is the grant recipient, but we will in this agreement, the city would front that money and then get reimbursement back once the invoice is paid. It is a state fund originated from the state level, so getting reimbursement could take a few weeks, could take up to 6 to 8 weeks. I think is what they told us. So just know that we'll in this agreement we'll step in, pay the invoices, and then seek reimbursement some few weeks later from the state. So that's it in a nutshell. Other than that, the Historical Society group is here. Michelle Quilter would like to say a few things, Mr. President.
Michelle, would you please give your name and address for the record?
My name is Michelle Quilter. I'm the president of Oregon Jerusalem Historical Society, and I live at 4810 South Deal Lane.
Thank you.
The city has been a wonderful partner to us for many, many years. I mean, going back many, many years. And we have this demolition that has to be done by June 30th of 2025. What I would like to do is I'd like to introduce you to the team that's in charge of this demolition on our end.
Thank you.
Linda Rossler is the vice president of the Historical Society. She is our lead on the demolition and the project manager. Rob Gerhart, he's the chairman of our Buildings and Grounds. He works alongside Linda, and he will, well, he has a little more time than Linda, so he's doing a lot of the talking with all of the people. And then we have Sue Hopkins, and you may be familiar with Sue Hopkins. She's retired from the city, from your finance department. She is our internal auditor. She's been our internal auditor for a year. She will be handling all of our paperwork. She's going to make sure that all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed. So this is our team. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Quilter. Council, any questions?
Mr. President.
Mr. Salander.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just have a kind of a general question really here, and thank you. And you guys do some amazing things. I know we've talked also about some of your visions going forward, and it's exciting, the things you have planned. So I'm excited to join in with us on this. But my question has to do in general, because I know we have a few items here that have grants involved. And just with the whole current climate right now with grants being paused and so forth, are we at any sort of, I don't want to say risk, it's really not the word I want to say, but is there any chance, or do we have any thought of if this could happen to any of these grants? And if so, what do we do, I guess?
Mr. President, Mr. Slander.
Yes, Mr. Major.
Since this is state money, it's not federal in origin.
Mhm.
We don't believe that there's any threat or any risk to these funds being pulled away.
Okay. And because I know there's another item, I forget which one it was right now, that has a grant involved with it too, but we'll get that when we get there. But okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr.
President.
Salander.
Mr. President,
Mr. Wallenzeck.
thank you, Mr. President. Um, The original 30,000 that we budgeted last year, I cannot recall. The Historical Society came to us and talked to us, and I believe it was about the wood cladding on the back of the building that was deteriorating to a point that they needed monies to fix that. Was that being fixed through another means now?
We actually paid for that ourselves.
Oh, so you didn't use this grant? Okay. I was worried that there was gonna be more money needed to then go back and fix that then.
The city is very generous to
Yep.
us. The city gives the Historical Society $10,000 a year in reimbursement for heating, water,
Mhm.
sewer.
Mrs. Quilder, could you please come up to the microphone, please?
Yeah, and I know, I just wanted to make sure that that problem was
We,
alleviated.
we handled all of those repairs ourselves,
Okay,
and we kept, and the money was awarded actually in April 2023. So you've been holding it for us
sure.
for the last 2 years. And
Thank
we
you.
paid for all of those.
Yeah,
other things.
thank you. I just wanted to make sure that problem was resolved.
It is.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Mhm.
Thank you. Council, anything further? I'll seek a motion to move item 48 of 2025 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Horniak.
I move to move item, I'm sorry, is it 48
48, yes.
of 2025 to next week's agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Horniak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Salander. We have a motion by Mr. Horniak, second by Mr. Salander to move item 48 to next week's agenda. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, item 48, 2025 is moved to next week's agenda. At this time, if you guys would like to stay or leave, you're more than welcome to.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
I want to address the next few items, and they are items 28, 29, and 30 from the Recreation Department, our annual contracts to take care of different services. And I would like it if you would have the rec director address each of those. Excuse me. And then when we get to item 31 through 39, those are also renewals on annual contracts that Mr. Roman would present. So he could present, Mr. Borton could speak to the first three, and Mr. Roman would speak to the next 9 on these annual things that are pretty much boilerplate material. And then you guys could move them forward as groups and on things that are very traditional and normal functions every year.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council, we okay with that? Hearing none, no complaints, that's how we'll do it. So the first 3 items, Mr. Borton is going to bring forth tonight is item 28, item 29, and item 30 of 2025. Mr. Borton.
Thank you, Mr. President. As the mayor said, these are annual contracts that we have. The first one being our porta pot services that we utilize throughout our complex, throughout the city at various locations, for various events that are held throughout the city as well. And actually, the number of tickets this year, as we looked at total usage and tried to find areas to cut down on. Last year, there was for 758 tickets. This year, it's for 720 tickets. So that cost actually is less, or the number of tickets is fewer than we gave away last year. The second one is our annual lawn care agreement for our rec complex out here for weed control at the parks, those kind of things. True Green was the successful bidder again this year. They did the project last year and they did a great job for us as well. So we see no problem moving forward with them. And then the last one is just our annual uniform contract. Essentially saying that there's a possibility with some of these vendors, because we never know at the start of the year how many players, how many uniforms we're going to need, that the vendors listed, we could exceed $25,000 once we go through the bidding process through the end of the season. So that's what that third one is stating. And again, we've done that the last several years as well.
Thank you, Mr. Borton. Council, any questions on items 28, 29, or 30? Hearing none, I will seek a motion to move items 28, 29, and 2030. Good year.
Mr.
Um,
President,
Yes, sir.
thank you, Mr. President. I make a motion to move items number 28, 29, and 30 of 2025 to next week's regular meeting agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenzak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Horniak. Excuse me. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, items 28, 29, and 30 are moved to next week's agenda. Moving forward, we'll go to item 31 through 39 for Mr. Roman, and we'll go right to Mr. Roman.
Thank you, Mr. President. These are, again, the mayor mentioned the annual contracts. Remember, these are on a as-needed basis only, only as we need them throughout the year. But item 31 is with Demetrica and Jacobs. They provide tech support for the water plant and the wastewater plant. Item 32 is with Solomon Diving. They do underwater inspections for the water treatment plant. They've done it for storm and sanitary sewers as well, the large sewers. Bowser Morner, they provide construction, they're item 33. They provide construction material testing and inspection. They do provide geotech and environmental engineering as well as soil borings. The same thing is applied for item 34 with TTL testing and drilling services, also TTL engineering services. Provide the exact same thing as Bowser Morner. And just between them and even Verdantis is a third company, but between all three of them, if it's soil borings or it's all similar work, we try to get quotes from all three. And so even though we have the unit prices, it's more about their time that is required, and we do have them compete against each other every once in a while. But Verdantis is item 35. They provide construction material testing and inspection, but they also provide more environmental engineering. Sometimes if we have a hydrocarbon spill and we're uncertain as to what the material is, we sometimes will go to either Verdantis or Bowser Morner for more of an environmental review of the soils. Item 36 is with QCI, it's quality control inspection. We use them for construction inspection in the right of way. If we have a new subdivision come in, or we, like our water line project out front, we hire QCI for that. Item 37 is with DGL. They provide traffic studies. And one thing about DGL and any other engineering firm that provides traffic design, if it's a major ODOT project, we go and see qualification statements and we have to get quotes, and anything over 25,000, you have to officially do that, advertise for quotes and so on. But sometimes if something pops up or we're doing our own engineering analysis or questions come up on accidents or warrants, sometimes we'll use DGL to handle that. So that's what this annual contract would be for. Davy Resource Group, they provide wetland support. Basically, they spray and spot treat invasive species for all our wetlands. We have that always in our annual contract or CIP. And then West Erie Realty provides right-of-way acquisition. Normally, again, if it's an ODOT project, we have to see qualification statements and we have to go on who's most qualified and then get quotes. But sometimes when we do our in-house designs, water lines, sewers, we may need easements or appraisals. Sometimes we'll go straight to West Erie and have them provide that work for us. And it's nice to have a contract in place for that. So happy to answer any questions on any one of these 9 items.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council. Hearing no questions, I would like to seek a motion to add items 31 through 39 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mrs. Paula.
so moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Mr. Salander? Thank you. We have a motion by Mrs. Paula, second by Mr. Salander to move items 31 through 39 to next week's agenda. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, items 31 through 39 are moved. Just a quick note offside. We're having trouble with our video portion of this. It's not showing the video, but Oh, it is working now? Oh, okay, we're back in business because we were down for a little bit, but thank you. I just wanted to let people know that the video was out, but it's back in. So thank you. Our next item would be, excuse me, some paperwork to go through. Would be item 40 of 2025, and that's being presented by Mr. Roman.
And if I could, Mr. President, I'm going to present item 40 and 41 together as well. That's okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so item 40 is needed to purchase electronic remote transmitters for our water meters. This is for the distribution department. United Systems is the sole vendor for the Itron ERT system, which we've had for years. The unit costs are included in Exhibit A, and these purchases were included in the 2025 CIP. Item 41 is needed for the purchase of water meters and registers for the distribution system. And Buckeye State Pipe and Supply is the sole vendor for Badger meters. Again, their unit cost is in Exhibit A, and again, the purchase was included in our 2025 CIP. So again, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council. If there aren't any additional questions, I will seek a motion to move item 40 and 41 to next week's regular meeting.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Salinger.
I'd like to make a motion to move item 40 and 41 of 2025 to next week's agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Salinger.
Second.
Second by Ms. Pauloff. We have a motion by Mr. Salinger, second by Ms. Pauloff, to move items 40 and 41 to next week's agenda. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none. Items 40 and 41 are moved to next week's agenda. We will move on to item 42. That is being presented by Mr. Roman again.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is needed to enter into an engineering design contract with Kleinfelder Group. Actually, it's Kleinfelder, but they were formerly Poggemeyer Design Group. And about 5 years ago in 2020, we hired Poggemeyer Design Group to design our Oregon Multi-Use Trail Phase 5. This goes from actually where the Dairy Depot is on Navarre, down an alleyway, down Dustin's, Paper Street, all the way over to Oregon Town Center. I'm sure Council recalls that in our budget meetings and talking about this. We did receive a grant for $400,000 from ODOT. That is a state grant, not a federal. So I don't believe there'd be any effect to that. So for Mr. Sandler's question earlier. But at this point, and we've made tweaks in-house in terms of laying out the alignment, and we also, the original design is not per current ODOT standard, and we really needed to basically amend the design. And Kleinfelder really did the original design. We felt it was appropriate to go to them to revise this. So their costs and scope of work is included in Exhibit A. They would be the best engineering firm to finish this design. So, and again, this work was included in the 2025 CIP budget, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Wallenczak.
thank you, Mr. President. Would this path be off-road or would it be on the roadway?
Well, it's a good question. It's mainly off-road, but along Dustin, in some places it'll be in place of the sidewalk that's there. But when we get to the boulevard area, we were short on right-of-way, and we may move it into the road on the eastbound lane. So if you recall the boulevard, it goes to 2 lanes in each direction. They're really not needed. All you need is 1 lane. So what we're gonna do is put this 10-foot path in the southern 2 eastbound lanes.
Okay.
And we'll have grass and it'll look pretty, but it basically doing it because we don't have the right of way, but it's a big design change. And that's one of the bigger costs to this revision. So, but it's mainly off-road to answer your question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak. Council, anything further? Hearing nothing or hearing no objections or any other questions, I would seek a motion to move item 42 of 2025 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mrs. Pauloff.
so moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Pauloff.
Second.
Second by Mr. Salinger. Thank you, Mr. Salinger. We have a motion by Ms. Pauloff, second by Mr. Salinger to move item 42 of 2025 to next week's agenda. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, item 42 is moved to next week's agenda. The next item on the agenda for discussion is item 43 of 2025. That's being presented by the mayor and Mr. Roman. Mr. Roman?
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is needed to sign a design amendment with the Bureau Group, Bureau Group Architecture for the street department. Garage facility, as you're aware, we awarded that contract last year. In our construction meetings, Midwest Contract has offered a deduct of $10,200 to switch the wash bay to a pre-engineered metal building roof system with masonry walls or block walls in lieu of wood framing and siding as originally designed. And you don't know who you're going to get as a contractor to bid this, but their niche really is masonry work, and they have offered this deduct. But you also have to provide engineering to make it work, and we do need Bureau Group for that. So they have an added cost for design, $5,980. It still would be a net deduct of $4,220 to do this. And we believe masonry wall would be much better than the wood framing. So again, it's a wash bay. So anyways, it's really a design change, but the reason we're doing it is to get a deduct on construction for a much better product for the wash bay. So that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any additional questions? Hearing none, I will seek a motion to move item 43 of 2025 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mrs. Paula.
so moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Paula.
Second?
Second by Mr. Salinger. Thank you, Mr. Salinger. We have a motion by Ms. Paula, second by Mr. Salinger to move item 43 to next week's agenda. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, item 43 will be moved to next week's agenda. Our next item up on the agenda tonight for discussion is item 44 of 2025, being presented by the mayor and Mr. Roman. We'll go right to Mr. Roman.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is needed to weight restrict Pickle Road between Woodville Road and Wheeling Street. As noted in Exhibit A, that was a notice that we sent to AA Booze and TRC, but the road itself is deteriorating at a much faster rate compared to other roads that see trucks. And, the potholing isn't just your normal potholing. They're very deep, and it's an old concrete road. We definitely have to prepare to simply replace the road, but until then, we do need a weight restriction. Also, the tracks, we've talked about the tracks for a long time now. And I really believe the true cause for deterioration are the tankers that come from TRC, go to and from Wheeling to Woodville. And I think we need a weight restriction for Pickle Road for that. We do have Michigan loaded trucks that we do provide permits for. They do use Wheeling to Woodville. And but right now on Pickle, any Ohio weighted trucks, which are 80,000 pounds or less, can freely use Pickle. And I think that's the damage. So what I've said to AA Booze and TRC that since they are local property owners within that block, they certainly would have the right to get annual permits for their trucks and equipment to come and go. TRC has a gate 9, they would do the same. But every other through truck, the only way you could use that section of Pickle is if you got a permit. So if there was a height issue and we have the Woodville Road underpass, there's a height issue, you could use Pickle through a permit, but otherwise the route would be Woodville to Wheeling for these tanker trucks. And Wheeling is built for that truck traffic. So anyways, happy to answer any questions. Again, I know residents have asked for this in previous years, and I think it's appropriate to do at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any questions?
Mr. President.
Mr. Walmsley.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Roman, other than posting signs in that area on going both directions, what else do we do to make sure that the trucks know that that is now a weight restricted roadway?
Well, it'll be enforced, and it'll be the police officers writing tickets is probably the best way. So.
Okay, I just wanted to, I don't want to post them and then not do anything.
Well, and see, and like up to now, and I drive that way a lot, and I would always see tankers, and I'd always wonder if it's the Michigan loaded trucks cheating, And you can't tell, can't just tell by looking, you know, so, that's the problem. And, you know, the only way you can enforce even the permits we've written, is to basically, if you see a tanker on pickle, that would be to enforce it with the
So
police.
weed them out through enforcement.
Yep.
Very good. Thank you.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mrs. Paulo.
this is for Mr. Roman. Do they still go by Google Maps when they drive to their destinations like the delivery drivers do? And
Well, you would, you know, they probably do, Mrs. Paul, if they, I'm sure they do. They know Pickle's a good shortcut, you know. You know, when the weighted trucks come in, well, the Michigan trucks come in empty, all right? They're going to the fueling station. But what they have to do is they have to go to TRC's main gate on Woodville to get their tickets. And then they have to go to the tank farm off of Wheeling. Well, so I'm routing, so it's not a heavy load to use Woodville to Wheeling, but after they fill up at the tank farm, they head north. It's heavy, but they know Pickle's right there. It's easy to just cut through. And then, you know, they probably have done it for decades. So, but on the Michigan loaded permits, I write Pickle Road is prohibited. And, you know, I tell them if I catch them cheating, I'm not writing a permit again. But that's just the Michigan loaded trucks. The Ohio weights can easily use Pickle right now.
so how would you
without their-
police that?
Again, they're gonna enforce it. They're gonna
Every
sit
time
there.
they
and-
see a truck.
Yep. They see a tanker truck, they're pulling them over.
Now, Mr. Roman, when we go and rebuild that roadway, are we building it
It's-
for heavy loads, or are we gonna build it as if it was a 6,000 pound restricted limit?
That's a real good question, Mr. Rollins. To me, it was always meant to be a truck route. It should be, you know, but I can tell you the railroad, just the way the tracks is skewed at an angle, it's not the best for any truck, even if you rebuilt the road. The road is an old concrete road and it's gonna be expensive to rebuild it. I can tell you that. So it's something we have to think about, really. It doesn't have to be a truck route. Woodville is a state route. Wheeling is built for that industrial traffic as well. So I don't think it necessarily has to be. That's something we would have to check. If you wanted to go to Michigan Low, it's gonna be an expensive job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr.
Mr.
President.
Horniak.
Question again, for you, Mr. Roman. So if we have the businesses that are right there and have the ability to get permits for traveling that road, how are they identified? Or are they just caught if they're traveling down that road, they're pulled over? Because I got to think that's going to be a nuisance and.
Yeah, it helps.
How are those identified?
Yeah, I think for the most part, when their trucks are identified with a logo, a Booz or TRC, that's certainly gonna help our officers. But I will tell them with our annual permits, they have to keep a copy of whatever we write as their permit on their dashboard or keep it in their truck to identify that. That's all you can do.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Roman. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Council, any further questions? Hearing none, I will seek a motion to move item 44 of 2025 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mrs. Paula.
so moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Second by Mr. Salander. We have a motion by Ms. Paula, second by Mr. Salander to move item 44 of 2025 to next week's agenda. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, item 44 of 2025 is moved to next week's agenda. The next item on the agenda for discussion is item 45 of 2025 being presented by the mayor and Public Service Director, Mr. Roman. Mr. Roman.
Thank you, Mr. President. This resolution is needed to help the city obtain grants for public road infrastructure projects. As much as the Public Service Department has always used the complete street principles for street design, we did not have a resolution showing that we have city council support. And a lot of times when you're applying for these grants, they want to know that this city as a whole supports what we're doing. But the complete street principles is really to make sure that you're designing roads for all modes of traffic, pedestrians, bicyclists, bus riders, motorists, emergency personnel, truck drivers. You're trying to make sure you're looking at all modes of traffic. We don't just stop there. We look at utilities. We look to see if there's sewers available. You know, what else do you need to provide for right of way? Again, in the subdivisions, we require sidewalks and, you know, if you're designing a bridge overpass, you want to put in sidewalks and things like that. That's part of this complete streets design. And we've always done it, but again, I think even with the TMACOG grants that we apply to, they'll assign a point if you have a complete streets resolution or ordinance on file. So I believe you guys would all support this, but a resolution would prove it. So that's it. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any questions? Hearing none, I will seek a motion to move item 45 of 2025 to next week's agenda. May I please have a motion?
Mr. President,
Yes, Mrs. Pollock.
so moved.
Thank you, Ms. Pollock.
Second.
Second by Mr. Sandlander. We have a motion by Ms. Pollock, second by Mr. Sandlander to move item 45 of 2025 to next week's agenda. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, item 45 of 2025 is moved to next week's agenda. The next item on the agenda is for discussion is item 46 of 2025, being presented by Mayor Safarian and Assistant Fire Chief Mark Mullins.
Thank you, Mr. President. Council, this ordinance would allow the fire department to continue to purchase medical equipment through Boundtree. They supply us for everything from Band-Aids to IVs, and everything in between. We've dealt with Boundtree for the last, as long as I've been here, so over 28 years. They do give us the best possible pricing, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. Council, any questions? Hearing none, I will seek a motion to move item 46 of 2025 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Mrs. Pollock,
so moved.
thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Sandlander. We have a motion by Ms. Pollock, second by Mr. Sandlander to move item 46 of 2025 to next week's agenda. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, item 46 of 2025 is moved to next week's agenda. The next item on the agenda is item 47 of 2025, and that is being presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Finance Director Nick Roman. Mr. Roman?
Thank you, Mr. President. This item is needed to continue the process of vacating the 50-foot wide Wesley Street from Finley Avenue to the north line lots of 64 and 82 in the East Hollywood addition. Back last July, we passed Resolution 117, which was accepting the petition from the property owners to have this paper street vacated, and then to send it to the Planning Commission to get an opinion on whether they thought it was in the best interest of the city to vacate this piece of land. They approved it 3-0, and now it is back to us to approve the declaration of intent. If this is passed, letters will go out to the property owners and let them know what their portion would cost to purchase the property, and from there they can purchase it. If there's any questions, please let me know.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. I just have, I have one real quick question. What happens if you send the letters out and one of the people do not want to sell?
So everybody signed the petition saying that they're willing to vacate it. So it's not that they're selling land, they are buying.
I mean, that's what I meant.
So it's
that they
owned by
don't
the
wanna buy
city.
it.
So everybody's offered their portion. So it's basically split in half from from each side. We actually do know that one of the property owners does not want their portion. So the property owners adjacent to it, they're able to buy the full portion of that. So that's.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any additional questions? Hearing none, I will seek a motion to move item 47 of 2025 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mrs. Paula?
so moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Sandlander. We have a motion by Ms. Paula, second by Mr. Sandlander to move item 47 of 2025 to next week's agenda. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, item 47 of 2025 is moved to next week's agenda. We already did item 48, so we'll move on to the final item on the agenda for discussion is item 49 of 2025, and that's being presented by Mayor Safarian and City Administrator Joe Major. We'll go right to Mr. Major.
Thank you, Mr. President. And as we talked last week, this is a 9-month moratorium on marijuana dispensaries. And the reason why we're seeking to place a new moratorium on is is in light of Senate Bill 56. And wait and see what happens with that and give city council a chance to reconsider what was passed for dispensaries last year. So with that, take any questions.
Council.
Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. Wallenzeck.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Mazer, in the description or heading of the ordinance or the resolution says for a period not to exceed. So is there a point where we could pull this back in 6 months?
Yes.
Once we figure out what's going on and we discuss and figure out where we want to be as a city, then we could pull it if we wanted to. It's not a hard set 9 months.
Regular council meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
And Mr. President, if I
Yes.
may, you can also extend it another 3 months, so it can go up to a year.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Major. Council, any further questions? If not, I would seek a motion to move item 49 of 2025 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Mrs. Pauloff.
so moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Pauloff.
Second.
Second by Mr. Sandler. Thank you. We have a motion by Ms. Pauloff, second by Mr. Sandler to move item 49 of 2025 to next week's agenda. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, item 49 of 2025 is moved to next week's agenda. With all of the items on the agenda being considered, we will now move on to the mayor's report.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have no report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Major.
Thank you, Mr. President. One item I did want to bring up, because you didn't see it on the agenda, was an item that came out of the committee meeting from last week that had to do with mowing in the right-of-way. And we were planning on bringing that item to the city council meeting next week. And that would change the length of grass from 10 inches to 8 inches. We just didn't have everything ready at that time to have it on for this committee of the whole. But I will just kind of go through a quick list here of the communities around us. Maximum grass height for Oregon is 10 inches per the property maintenance code and the Oregon Municipal Code 915. That's been in place since 2013. Maumee is 8 inches, Perrysburg's 8 inches, Toledo is 8 inches. Rossford is 6 inches, Sylvania is 6 inches, and Waterville is 12 inches. So we felt that 8 inches was the uniform height, so to speak. And if anybody has any other ideas or any other thoughts on what height it should be, because it wasn't explicitly clear at the last meeting, please let us know. But as it stands, what we plan to present next Monday would be for 8 inches on that. So outside of that, just as a kind of reminder, we did have an article that came out last year during the budget hearings about roundabouts. I think everybody saw that Perrysburg and Northwood both turned down funding for roundabouts, but we were still planning on moving some of those ideas forward at some point in 2025 for some strategic intersections. The three that we were looking at, and Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're all on Wynn Road: Corduroy and Wynn, Pickle and Wynn, and Brown and Wynn. So those were the three that were being looked at. I don't know if there are any others in specific, but other than that, the last item was that talking with Mr. Strake, we would like to send out some notices about pool safety, swimming pool safety, and making sure that owners of pools have the appropriate fences up around their pools so that we don't have any incidents. I know there was an incident a couple of years ago at a private residence, but we'll send those notices out, and that is a requirement. So that's all I have, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Major. Ms. Pepora.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Pepora. Mr. Roman.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Mr. Horniak.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Ms. Pauloff.
Thank you, Mr. President. Nothing from my standing committee. Well, half of it is. It was a very, very busy weekend, city service wide. The police, thank you for all your work this past weekend. Fire department, the streets department especially, with what they had to deal with all the ice and the slush and everything. So really, really proud of our streets and our safety services this weekend. And thank you so much for a well-done job. Thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Paulo. Mr. Wallenczak.
No report this evening, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak. Mr. Salander.
Thank you, Mr. President. Nothing from my standing committee, just one quick thing. Since the Historical Society was in here with us this evening, just want to let everybody know about they have a sweet treats retreat, learning about to make some sweets. So coming up on March 4th from 6 to 7. So they do have quite a few seats available for it. So I know I've signed up for it, so I'm looking forward to it because I like sweets. So that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sandlander. And I have nothing from my standing committee, but I'd like to diddle the remarks that Ms. Paula said about our fire department, our public safety, the police department, and our streets department. What a wonderful job. I mean, you make it so easy for us, so thank you. If there is no further business before council, I will seek a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Mr. Horniak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Sandlander. Council, any objections? This meeting is adjourned.